Good evening, or rather good afternoon. It's January 22nd, 2020. This is the meeting of the Oakland Unified School District Board of Education. Can we have a roll call, please?
On the attendance roll call, Student Director Garibo, Student Director Smith-Dahl, Director Torres, Director Harris, Director Yee, Director Ng, Director Hinton-Hodge,
Present.
Vice President Gonzalez, President London.
Present.
Quorum present.
Thank you. At this time, the board will be recessing into closed session, where we will be discussing labor matters, legal matters, public employee matters. We may discuss public employee performance evaluations and pupil matters. We will reconvene at 5:30. We are now in recess. Good evening. This is the January 22nd meeting of the Oakland Unified School District Board of Education. Can we have a roll call, please? Coming out of recess.
On the attendance roll call, second attendance roll call, Student Director Garibo, Student Director Smith-Dahl, Director Torres, Director Harris, Director Yee, Director Ng will be joining us around 6, or is expected to join us around 6. Director Hinton-Hodge, Vice President Gonzalez. She's also expected to join us at some point in the meeting. President London.
Present.
Quorum present.
Thank you. Our last 6 regular board meetings have been disrupted by protesters. We are now at another meeting where the protests may continue. I want to reiterate that this board deeply respects the will of our community to vehemently disagree with the decisions that the board makes. That is a cornerstone of our democracy, and it is critical to the success of any local government. As we have done at prior meetings, we will need to leave the stage and move upstairs if anyone disrupts the meeting, either by physically approaching the stage or by otherwise making it impossible for the board to conduct the business of the district. By making sure that our board meetings take place, we are simply doing what needs to be done in order for facilities to be built and maintained, students to have the supports that they need to succeed, and employees to have the proper permits and credentials to serve our students. Please note that you can access the bathroom through the doors in the back corner. After reporting out of closed session, we're going to modify the agenda so that the first thing up is the superintendent's report to honor Mr. Oscar Wright, an elder in our community. We are delighted to have him with us tonight, and we are very much looking forward to honoring you, Mr. Wright. We will then turn to the report from our 7-Eleven committee on disposition of properties that we might declare surplus. That's part of a special order of the day. So just those are the things that we want to make sure you all are aware coming this evening. I will now report out of closed session from tonight. Please note that this information is being offered to provide greater transparency, is made at my discretion, and is more than is required by the Brown Act. On item C1, item 19-1555, conference with labor negotiators, the board received a report on this matter, the board discussed this matter, and the board gave direction. Legal matters. On item C2, number 09-0502, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, the board received a report on this matter and discussed it. On item C3, number 171765, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, the board received a report on this matter, the board discussed this matter, and the board provided direction. On item C4, number 19-2487, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, the board received a report on this matter, the board discussed this matter, and the board gave direction on this matter. On item C5, number 200135, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, the board received a report on this matter, the board discussed this matter, the board gave direction on this matter. Public employee matters. On item C6, number 19-1486, public employee discipline, dismissal, release, the board did not take up this matter this evening. On item C7, 19-1559, public employee performance evaluation for the superintendent of schools, the board did not take up this matter. On item C8, number 19-1658, public employee performance evaluation for the general counsel, the board did not take up this matter. pupil matters on items C9 and C10 expulsion appeal hearings. The board heard these matters and will vote on them in public session in section 5V, V like Victor, on the agenda. That concludes the report from closed session. That was item G, President's Statement of Reportable Action Taken in Closed Session. Item H is a review of our oath of office and our meeting norms. Those are published in the agenda on page 7. We will now move, as I stated earlier, to item M, which is the superintendent's report. Superintendent, thank you very much.
Thank you, Board President. And good evening, everyone, community. Good evening, Board of Directors. We are here tonight to give a special recognition to Elder Oscar Wright. And thank you. I just want to say a few words, and then I'm going to bring up our Senior Advisor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Chris Chapman, to just say some more words, and then give Mr. Wright, if he so desires, the opportunity to speak as well. So I actually remember Mr. Wright. I remember you as a teacher, and I remember going to many board meetings as a young teacher back in 1025, and just being very moved and called to action by just your commitment to equity and your commitment to African American students and really all students in the district. I just remember all your moving speeches and just the continued push for us to do what's right for students. So I'm deeply honored to now be sitting in this seat and have an opportunity to personally thank you and honor you for all of your hard work, your leadership for the city of Oakland, your love for our students and our families, and just the legacy that you're leading, and hopefully that folks of my generation and the younger generation, I like to think that I'm young, but I know I'm getting older, that we will carry on your torch, because obviously the work, there's still much to be done. So we thank you, we love you, and we honor you for everything that you have done for our district and for our city. And with that said, I will pass it to Mr. Chapman to say some more words so we can love on you some more and then give you a chance to speak as well.
As said, my name is Chris Chapman, a Senior Advisor of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Man, one of the things that I've learned in my 52 years of life is that we stand tall because we stand on the shoulders of those who came before me and before us. And the work that I've been a part of the last 10 years that you all have supported, the birth of African American male achievement, now is being replicated across the country, the Office of Equity and the targeted strategies that now is being replicated across the country, really would not be here if it wasn't for the relentless and unapologetic advocacy of one man, and that is Oscar Wright. He, through the last 5 decades, has been holding all of us accountable, in particular around the needs of African American children. Not when it was a trend or when it was fashionable, because it was the right thing to do. And so I really want to keep my words short to give him the time that he needs in the spirit of speaking truth to you all. But I want to personally thank Oscar Wright for believing in me, for believing in we, and making sure that we all have a platform now to be unapologetic and intentional around the needs of Black children, but ultimately all children. And so one extraordinary highlight that we all need to take congrats to is something this man started 19 years ago, and that was the African American Honor Roll celebration. And I want folks to know, across this country, the largest African American Honor Roll in the United States is held at Axville Gospel Church, honoring several thousand African American children from middle school to high school. But that was one man's vision, along with the Boyds, who started that, really with a dollar and a dream. So without further ado, if all of us, community, can stand up and acknowledge Brother Oscar Wright for 96 years of service. This is your moment, brother. We love you. Thank you for coming in. take the time. Give it up, give it up. If it was Jay-Z and Beyonce, y'all be going crazy. There'd be no Jay-Z and Beyonce if it wasn't for this man.
Thank you. My name is Oscar Wright. I'm an American man of 96 years who's proud to be black. One of 7 brothers who served in World War II and the Korean War. 6 of my brothers lay buried in military graves. 1954, the Supreme Court issued a decree that struck down the separate but equal doctrine. Instead of the Congress making it all the schools equal as the Constitution provides for, Congress let the southern states close all the black schools, demoted and fired all the black administrators, saying they wasn't qualified to teach the more affluent white students. In 1957, Daisy Bates took 9 little kids in the Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, in an attempt to try to abide by the Supreme Court decision. Governor Arthur Forbes, he set up a condition there where it was going to be a bloodbath. They're going to kill to keep those little kids out of there. President Eisenhower in 1957 he federalized the Arkansas State Militia, the National Guard, and sent the 101 Airborne in to protect those 9 kids. And in spite of all those 9 kids went through, all 9 of them succeeded. So if you know the truth, once they bust the black kids after Brown boys to board education into the white schools, because they closed the black ones, and the black kids began to receive the same quality of curriculum, instruction, supervision, and administration as the white kids, most of them equal and some of them excel. And when Daisy Bates ordeal in Little Rock, and all 9 of those kids are freed in 1965, our federal government enacted the Elementary and Secondary Act of 1965, Title I. That legislation gave Congress the power to distribute hundreds of billions of dollars specifically to the public schools to upgrade the reading and the math of the students who had been discriminated with, segregated, and denied and was poor. At that time, it was black, poor, white, and Native American kids. In that legislation, they made it mandatory parent and community involvement in the planning, operation, implementation, and evaluation of the entire program. In writing that in that regulation there, that legislation, it limited the academic achievement of the recipients of that Title I money to 49% out of a possible 100. If a kid, as long as that kid, the school districts then began to lower the standards, that would in itself rewarded student failure, teacher incompetency, administrative complacency, and guaranteed a poor and white kids forever. They came up with students at risk, special education, and all these other things that they're to identify these black kids and other things like that. And it went on at that time. They then had to, as the federal government looked at this sort of thing, they then put all these black kids into that category there. And here's the results of it there. And it came out of your research department, Oakland Research Department. It ended up saying 53 out of the 53,000 students in the Oakland school, 53% of them was black. 71% of the students enrolled in special education is black. 37% of the students enrolled in the gifted and talented class, only 37% was black. 64% of the students retained were African American students, or black. 67% of the students classified as truant was black. 71% of African American males went to school regularly. 19% of the 12th grade African black students didn't graduate. 80% of the students suspended was black. Grade point average was 1.8.
Amy has arrived.
Excuse me, Mr. Wright. Director Ng is joining us by telephone, so that she's just listening in now, but she will be very honored to hear your remarks as well. Thank you.
Continue. I can continue then. In 1982, Dr. Shell, the rector of the University of California's Lawrence Hall of Science, set up a committee to develop a tracking system that taught kids in the same grade different levels of academic content. A lot of black people participated in developing that tracking system. Some of the most brilliant black people I know participated in helping develop that tracking system. And when the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, participated in development. Our NAACP in Oakland branch, at that time, they endorsed it. And that tracking system had 3 tracks. It had the university track, the state university track, and the community college track. And this will give you an example of the different levels of content. All of these kids now from 9th through 12th grade. English 1 GATE, university. English 1 survey, regular 4-year college. Community college is English skills. And math, university algebra. State university pre-algebra. Community college, general mathematics workshop. In the university, biology and science, biology in the state university, language art in the community college. Now all tests comes out of the university track. All tests, the CTBS, the CAP, the PSA, the Terry Nova, the Golden Gate, the SAT, all tests. So you teach the black kid all year English skills, but you test him in English 1 GATE. You teach him general mathematics workshop, and he tested in algebra. You teach him language arts, and he's tested in biology. And it went on down the line, you could see. And that was Oakland School District that they did that to those kids, you know. And I opposed to it. I went to the Office of Civil Rights and the Federal Education, the Department of Education, and I filed a complaint in '93. But in 1990, they told me in the first place that I didn't have enough documentation to merit their investigation. In 1990, this is one of you all's thing here. That was the document that came in from the board member. It said, Mr. Oscar Rice, the board asked me to place the issue of tracking on the board agenda. And then I won't read it all, but I said, first of all, it says, it's based on a premise. That's how they justified the tracking of these black kids in these classes. It's based on the premise that students' abilities are inherent, that some are superior, some are average, and some are below average. The premise states that nothing can be done to change it. Consequently, curriculum and instruction should be designed accordingly. The superior tracks has challenge and superior content. The average track have a curriculum based on the assumption that they did not need the higher skills and content and aimed at less demanding goals. Finally, the below average content is different from others in that it is much easier and does not include skill and content to believe to be duplicated. Number 2, it says, students are tested and assigned to these tracks on the basis of these assumed abilities. Once assigned, few students, if any, move up within the track assigned. Many may move downward. And you believe that? That's what Oakland did. I'm not accusing this board of doing it, but that's what happened to the black kids in this school district. Now that you all have our equity department here, equity means equal. Equal. When President Hoover was president and he was confronted by the Congress, his position on the status of Negro America then, we wasn't African Americans or people of color, we were Negroes then. But his response was, through freedom and universal education, we provide the training for the runners. We give to them an equal start. Through government, we provide the referees of fairness in the game. Chinese are the philosopher there. His position was that all men, Confucius, all men are practically the same. Education and determination sets them apart. I'm saying to you all tonight, I sure appreciate this recognition. And I hope that you all, this board, realize now that America, as Abraham said over 150 years ago, cannot survive half slaves and half free. Young Synod says, we'll either all die together or surely die separate. Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us that we are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, wrapped up in a single garment of destiny. Whatever happened to one of us happened to all of us. We'll either learn to live together or perish as fools. America is more divided now. The veil of the people is at an all-time low. Oscar Rice said, no nation is any stronger than the will of its people. If you want to kill a tree, you kill the root. If you want to kill a race of people, you kill a child. You all have the opportunity now. You all of that government that can provide the referees of fairness. I do humbly thank you all for this recognition. Very much.
Mr. Wright, we'd like to come take a photo with you. Thank you very much. We'll come down.
That's for you.
Okay.
And they're going to take a picture with you. They're going to come down and take a picture.
Okay.
So you want your son in the picture too?
Yeah, no.
Would it be okay if the kids, come on. You, Amy, kids, come on. You all, the school board, you all come down. Youth members.
We are so honored to have you here.
Yeah. Thank you, Bear. One last thing, I'd like to read this poem to you all. Y'all get back on the phone. Yes, sir.
Mr. Wright,
I want you
Mr. Wright has a poem he would like to share with us, and then we will provide a few minutes if there are people in the community who want to offer a tribute to Mr. Wright. I'm going to ask those who do want to speak from community to limit their comments, but Mr. Wright, there's so many people who want to honor you, but let's hear your poem, please.
I was born because I had no choice. I was born without even having a voice. I was given a name and given a race before I ever saw my own face. Was I red, yellow, brown? Was I black or white? How was I to know? I couldn't see nor read nor write. I knew not prejudice or the meaning of sin. I didn't even know whose house I was in. I had no knowledge of what I was to be. So whatever I became, I'm not to blame for me. If what I'm trying to tell you doesn't get across, sit back and think of all these years that you were our children's boss.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It- Do we have speaker cards on this item, Ms. Floyd?
Yes, we do, Madam President. We have 3 speakers, Mike Hutchinson, Mike Lowton, Ben Tapscott.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Loudon, and Mr. Tapscott, if you would like to come pay a tribute to Mr. Wright, we welcome you. This is specifically on the issue of honoring Oscar Wright.
Mike Hutchinson, a proud graduate of Oakland Public Schools, and proud to have grown up in the legacy that Mr. Wright helped create. You know, it's long overdue that Mr. Wright gets the recognition for what he really did. It makes me feel old even because a lot of the work he did allowed me to go to the high school that I went to in Oakland. You know, we were in the first wave of students where some of the real legal restrictions were finally dropped in Oakland. And unfortunately, not enough people have done work since then to really continue the legacy. And so hopefully, especially the people on the dais, use this as a marker where going forward you will rededicate yourself to actually truly honoring Mr. Wright and others' legacy by the work and the decisions you make. And you'll actually see that the betterment and improvement of our students, in particular our African American students in Oakland, should be paramount to the service and the job that you're engaged in.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
instead,
Hutchinson.
just one more minute, please. Instead, under your tenure, we've lost half of our black population in our Oakland schools.
Thank you.
Wall performance hasn't raised. So the question is, as you're honoring Mr. Wright, what are you going to really...
Let's have the next speaker, please. We have many people who want to address the school board this evening.
Mr. Wright's been fighting for all students for a long time. I got here in 1964, and I'm looking at 56 years from Fresno State to Oakland, California. And he's been fighting, and we've been fighting for all students. But our schools now are more segregated than they were 50 years ago. Many minorities are not getting educated, even though, quote unquote, we have public schools. Some of you have sold out and bought out, and we do not have quality education for all schools. Charter schools are not public. They segregate, they discriminate. Many of their teachers do not have teaching credentials. But he has fought hard and long, and some of us that are younger are still fighting. And the fact that we still have these issues in 2020 is not a tribute to his legacy or his effort.
Thank you, Mr. Tapscott. Mr. Loudon, your name was called. Did you want to offer public comment? Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Olabada, please come forward. Did you want to offer comment on this item, ma'am? Please come up. We'd like to hear from you.
Love life. When I came here in 2007, I had the occasion to go to a presentation for which this book was being offered as an opportunity to buy it and listen to the presenter, and that was Mr. Wright. And through this book, I was educated on some of the history of the Oakland Public School, particularly as it impacted African American children. And because I come from the South, I thought when I left the South and came here, it would be a different picture for African American people. But I found out it was a struggle, and it's still a struggle. And because of Mr. Wright's undying, unselfish, steadfast commitment to black people, I say the same thing. I unapologetically am going to speak to the issues of black people and African American children. And I get hit with all the time, you need to talk about everybody. Or if you don't talk about everybody, nobody's going to embrace it. But Mr. Wright did it, so I'm going to do it too. I'm going to talk about black people.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to offer tribute to Mr. Wright? Board members, did any of you want to briefly, I'm going to ask us to also limit our comments to 1 minute, but please go ahead. We're going to start with you, Director Harris.
Mr. Wright, as I got a chance to see you earlier, just want to say thank you. As a black man, it's nice to know and to have you there as a role model, as somebody who's an inspiration, and somebody who always reminds me that it's okay to fight for students that look like you, and by fighting for those students that look like me, all students will get better. And just being comfortable in that, and the first time I think I shed a tear at a board meeting was when I first met you and saw you come up and speak. And I remember talking to my father about you, and he was just so struck by your message and your passion, and that still, I think you were only 89 at the time, that you were still coming out and reminding us of our obligation to serve students and to serve black students. So thank you for being an inspiration to me, Mr. Wright. I'm happy to have this opportunity to honor you this evening.
Director Yee.
So, Mr. Wright, we've had our battles over the years, and we've had our good times over the years. And what I always remember about you in those times when you seemed bigger than life, you would look us in the eye and say, it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about the children. And that's what I'm going to remember you. And I hope that when you go into the next part of your life, that the person, you'll be able to transmit that message to whoever's over on the other side. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about the children. Thank you for that message for me all these years. And one last thing, even though you're known as an advocate for black and African American students, you cared about all kids. And we drove through Chinatown into North Oakland, and you told me and shared with me that life that you had and your commitment to all children. I'll never forget that.
Thank you. We're going to turn now to our student directors.
It's okay. Mr. Wright, we just want to thank you for all your work. Sitting here, me being a brown kid, and sitting here as black and brown youth, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't without your work. And, I do believe that we need to be taught more about, strong black men and strong black leaders like you in our schools, because, someday we want to get there. We want to advocate for all the resources in our communities and, just advocate for, the people and for the community.
I appreciate everything that you have done, and I appreciate being able to be here to honor you and your words of wisdom and everything that you have done for the black community and all communities here in Oakland, and just inspiring everyone to be unapologetically black is something that is a struggle sometimes, but thank you.
Director Hinton Hodge.
There's no words, Mr. Wright. Actually, I want to appreciate you for, you know, just your truth and speaking truth to power. I think, you know, you grew us up, so many of us that are here on the DS. Every superintendent I know, you made sure that you were present for them and supported their staff. And so with your critique, with your pushback, with your wanting us to stand up and work on behalf of young people, you didn't just complain, you actually offered solutions, and you also pulled up your sleeves and stood next to us in doing that particular work, be it the African American male honor roll when, you know, the district was giving money but then wasn't giving money. Those aren't things that you didn't complain about them, you just kept doing the work. And so I know that I stand on really incredible shoulders and hope to continue the work that you've done and the legacy that you've created in this space of Oakland, California, and also throughout the nation. So thank you for your service. And to your son, Carl, thank you for bringing him tonight and being present and the chip off the old block, too.
Thank you.
Director Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Wright, for being of service your entire life and for celebrating our scholars. Having attended the African American Honor Roll celebration each year, it's always encouraging to see our students beaming that they are getting recognized for doing well in school, and the fact that you started this many years ago, 19 years ago, and were a pioneer. So it's encouraging to have you right here in Oakland doing what everyone should be doing for their students who have to overcome disadvantages, and especially the historical context. Thank you for sharing about the children that were forced into the school, the white school, during desegregation. It was an interesting reminder that as much as the laws can change, we still have a long way to go desegregating schools today in many places, not just Oakland, but in our country, based on people's zip codes and redlining and housing issues. So I definitely appreciate that you have impacted thousands of youth and their lives have forever been changed by your efforts. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, there's not a whole lot I can add. I do reflect on the first time I saw you at a board meeting. It was I was up on the 4th floor, Harper Hall, at 1025 2nd Avenue, which meant it was a really, I don't remember what the topic was, but it was a controversial one because they were meeting upstairs. I wasn't on the school board yet. And you spoke, and the whole room fell silent and listened to you and your wisdom. And it was extremely powerful. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I'm really happy to see you here tonight. I've missed seeing you at the board meetings. I know it's been harder for you to come to them, and I'm really glad that we've had a chance tonight to honor you and reflect on the legacy that you've provided to all of us and so many thousands of other people in our city and our community. Thank you very much. Director Ng is on the phone. Did you want to offer comments, Director Ng?
Not at this time. I was really moved by all the words and all the tributes. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. So that was the superintendent's report. We are now going to go back in the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Wright. We're going to move on with the meeting. We're going to go back in the agenda to item I, special orders of the day. Tonight we have a historic moment for the school district. We're actually going to receive a report from the 7-Eleven committee. No, this is not a committee related to a convenience store. Under state law, if the district wants to declare properties as surplus, properties that we're no longer using, we are required to establish a committee of no less than 7 and no more than 11 people. We did that last year. The committee has done a tremendous amount of work, and tonight we are honored to welcome them here. So, colleagues, to remind you of the process, tonight we're going to accept the report. The committee will present their report, their findings and recommendations to us. In February, we will have recommendations and procedural issues from the staff. So there's no voting tonight. It's simply to accept and also recognize. So don't run off, because we do want to thank you for your service. And with that, I'm going to welcome our chair, Ms. Veronica Martinez. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, board members, directors, and like explained, my name is Veronica Martinez, and I'm the chair of the 7-Eleven committee that you appointed and gave us charges back. We started convening our meeting back in August last year. So on behalf of the members of the 7-Eleven committee, I'm here to report, like Director John Don said, our recommendations regarding the 5 sites that you gave for our consideration and for our review. I would like to also mention that I and my fellow committee members care deeply about the education system, the children and families that it serves, and the stewardship of public land and school properties. We took the charge of serving on the committee because we want the recommendations to reflect the interests of the community, of the Oakland children and their families, and the broader education system. The current context for this work could not have been more challenging. The findings of the grand jury report in 2019 resulted in great scrutiny and concern about how resources are managed. Excuse me. Amidst this climate, we engaged on our communities and reviewed the 5 properties that you presented for our consideration, all of which had been vacant for at least 5 years, and some even more longer than that. In addition, we created a list of possible uses for these sites. The task was actually quite challenging. It required twice the number of meetings that were originally projected by the school district. We ended up having 12 public meetings, including one at each one of the sites that we were considering. We were able actually to attend, to go visit each one of the sites, see the state in which it was, and host the community, open the doors for them to walk alongside with us. And then we had what we call listening sessions or community input sessions, in which community members told us about not only their opinions and their feelings about these sites that have been vacant, but also about their recommendations and their preference for their uses. The recommendations that I'm about to share could have not been possible without these sessions that we hosted, without listening to them. So we understand that revenue generation was a big motivating factor in establishing this committee, and we did consider those elements. However, we were very cautious of listening to the community and making sure that we come and present the voices of the communities to you. We hope that you're not disappointed with our recommendations. We do see a lot of potential in them. And before I go on in describing what we voted to recommend, I want to also note that we decided, after hearing the community, that there were 4 core values and belief statements that really got to us, and we wanted to make sure you heard of them. Regarding these 5 sites, these were sort of the driving factors of our recommendations. Number 1, do not leave any of these properties vacant. It's really a disservice for the community. They need to be utilized somehow. Number 2, keep properties in public hands as much as possible. Number 3, where a joint lease is possible, prioritize this type of use over surplusing it and disposing the site. And finally, we believe that the Board of Education should heed the community voices and recommendations in this report for repurposing vacant properties, especially for the purposes that support the education and well-being of children. So with those 4 overarching and core values, our recommendations are as followed. We voted, each one of us voted on whether to surplus or not to surplus. So we recommended not to surplus 3 sites: Washington, Webster, and Piedmont CDCs, the former Washington, Webster, and Piedmont CDCs. We recommend that you don't surplus those sites. We believe there is great potential on these sites for education or for partnerships with the community that will not require surplus in the sites. In addition, we voted and now recommend to you to surplus Edward Shantz, the former Adult Education Center, and Tilden CDC, the former Tilden CDC. And as hard as these votes and these recommendations were, especially recommending to surplus, one of the reasons why the majority of us voted this way, is because we believe there's greater potential in partnering outside of the school district on these sites. The state of the sites are really, it will be really hard and very challenging for the district to take on that. So those were our charges. In addition, you asked us to set a priority list of recommendation uses. Again, we listened to the community, and we presented the priority list in the report that you have with you on page 14 on different uses that the community will be very receptive with using them. Those were our charges. We made sure that we completed them with integrity, and always having the community and our students and the school district, the school community in general in mind. We did take, it wasn't without challenge. It was, the process was very was facilitated, but there were some challenges and some delays. And in order to maybe support future committees that you may call, we took the liberty to present also some recommendations on how to address future 7-Eleven committees that you may see the need. So I'll just give you, they're all spelled out in the report, but I'll give you a very high level of them. First, we think that there should be some sort of an orientation for committee members before the meetings get started, before the charges get in place. This is so that you and we all can ensure a clear understanding and agreement on the charges, and a clear understanding of what we can do and what we are not asked to do. There was some discrepancy and some controversy on whether the work we were doing, the work we were charged to do, was legitimate, and so that created sort of unnecessary delays and unnecessary questioning among each other. In terms of the disposition process, we strongly recommend the school district and the board to consider all possible options available of things to do with these sites before presenting them to a 7-Eleven committee. Throughout the process, we learned that there were many things that the district could have done without having to have the community go through the process. So consider those before. Basically, I think what we're saying is have the 7-Eleven committee be the last resource. And then in terms of staff participation in the process, we had good OUSD staff participation, and the consultants were supportive, but at times we felt that sort of like legal counsel would have been helpful to have there. And I think those are all sort of like high-level overarching points. You can, again, go in detail on the report. With that, I think that concludes our points, and we're here. We have 2 committee members, in addition to myself, who are here. We can answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, do you want to ask questions or offer comments? Because now's the time. So let's do 4 minutes, and then if we need to go around again, we can.
I don't have any questions. I don't know if every board member had an opportunity to review the report with staff, so we had a chance to get a look at the recommendations, ask questions, hear about the meeting, and some of us have been following the arc of the meetings. So I just first want to thank you for taking on twice the work you agreed to do. But there have been a number of community members. So I'm just going to speak specifically to the 2 surplus recommendations you did make, particularly the Edward Shantz property. That has been stuck, and there's been a number of community members that have wanted to do lots that would benefit community. So moving that parcel forward in the process is extremely helpful. I think it'll be extremely beneficial to the District 6 community. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for going through the process. So, and really want to encourage staff to look and the board to take heed to the recommendations you made about future uses of the 7-Eleven community and things to watch for. But most of all, just want to thank you for taking the extra time and encourage you to perhaps sign up for the next 7-Eleven committee.
Thank you. Director Yee?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I also read it, and I found it really interesting. I was only able to attend one of the meetings. I just want to acknowledge the facilitators that you have in the back. I thought they did a terrific job, and but I was really impressed with the structure and the discipline of the committee. So I congratulate you as the chair. I think there was a co-chair as well.
There was a vice president and a secretary.
Yeah. Okay.
Or vice chair. Sorry.
Well, it seemed to me to be very efficient, and with respect to your comment that not all of them needed to be in the process, I think the fact that we put them there was so that people could see that we were considering surplus. The fact it's just as important for you to tell us that it doesn't need to be surplus and there's another option, because we wouldn't have gotten to that place by having the discussion among ourselves of what to do with it. So clearly the opportunity, the option of surplusing and then coming back from it was more valuable than if we would have gone through the process and somebody would say, well, did you consider surplusing it? Then we would have had to start all over. So I think the fact that you did that work on the 5 was actually valuable. So I wouldn't underestimate how important it is to us. And also how important it was for us to see that the process could actually be accomplished by a time certain. And this gives us the kind of the power or the information, let's say, and the recommendations to move forward in the next step. So I just am really appreciative. I'm glad that you could come and deliver the report to us. It's just great seeing you all back together again. Thank you.
The students, did you want to offer any no comments from the students tonight on this item? Director Torres or Director Hinton-Hodge?
Excuse me, pardon me. Thank you so much for your service and your work. I believe that I agree with so much of what my colleagues have already said. I mean, I think it should be just really clear that you did work that was mandated by the state. That parameter, the guidelines for that is not something that we necessarily set. It is a part of legislation in a lot of ways, right? That's how we have to do it. So I appreciate you stepping up in that, and I know that it was not always very easy because of just kind of the pushback and ideological kind of fights and things like that, these values that may have seemed to come even into conflict at different times. But to stand in that as a leader, I just think is phenomenal. So you should actually run for school board, not be on a 7-Eleven committee. Thank you for your service, and I don't want to repeat, but what Director Yee said, I think this is the power of community, and this is the power of voice, and finding those middle places and standing in that struggle even. So I think we got criticized for bringing the sites to you that we did bring to you, right? So I think that it is important that we actually got to be in some level of relationship with community in this, and that you were actually that surrogate for us in a lot of ways. And so again, that's not necessarily easy work at all. But I do think that built a muscle for us that was very needed. It built that muscle around courage. It built a muscle around you don't get to kick cans down the road anymore. You started out and led with like this value we have around how do we generate revenue. I'm tired of cutting, all over the place in the district. Like, how do we leverage resources and assets? And that's not always, again, an easy conversation to have because it can feel disconnected between student achievement and families being satisfied with the district. So again, you stood in that complicated space. Thank you very, very much for your leadership around that.
Director Torres.
So, having been on the facilities committee that wanted to see this happen, I'm very excited about where we've come tonight after frequent and significant meetings that you guys had to adhere to, which is a lot to have asked of you. So first and foremost, thank you. And I see, other folks in the audience that were on the committee, and then of course the consultant, facilitator in the back, thank you. And because it was a lot of work. And having gone to not only the initial meetings when you were elected to be the chair, then the vice chair was selected and so on, and there were changes at that point, I knew it was going to be difficult. We never know how difficult, but it was absolutely necessary. And having seen the report where people talked about the neighbors who came and said, this property's been a blight, this property is the cause of crime, this property is the cause of drugs, this cannot continue, that you would have a blighted property for a decade right next to, homes. It's not okay. So I think that as much as it was difficult, controversial, people were questioning, you had to do this work. We needed this work done. And your recommendation lands pretty spot on. I also hope that we will adopt the recommendations that a board member be at all the meetings, at least one, right? This is something we're going to have to vote on, so we should at least be at every one of your meetings. But I also wondered about two more things, that there are nonprofits in this city and in every city that are working on housing. Recently, on the day before Christmas, the Unity Council opened Casa Arabella, low-income housing for over 500 people right before Christmas, so they could have a place to live and stop being unhoused. So that is a partner that could potentially be part of this process to inform some of the work and to give more ideas and creativity to allow it to happen without so much toxicity, because we need to house the people who are homeless in this city. We need to do it now. So that's what I really felt about this as a facilities committee member. And then secondly, there are also other consultants who are working with school districts, because school districts tend to be the largest landowners in cities, and they have underutilized pieces of property because schools may not have been designed in a way that it currently fits for 2020. So those consultants could also be helpful, aside from nonprofits that are from Oakland, to get us to the next 7-Eleven committee presentation and recommendation, because as I see it, we have a state loan that needs to be paid off. In just a few pieces of property being utilized potentially for housing, we could pay off that that state loan of $50 million. I have no doubt we could do that, and we should do that. And so I always said when we were talking 7-Eleven in the facilities, the way I see this is we have one goal that we could target, which is that state loan being paid off. And I still stand by that, so because we still have more property to deal with. So thank you for your recommendations.
Superintendent Johnson Trammell, did you want to offer any comments?
I just wanted to personally say thank you for your service. I know it was an arduous process. It was a sacrifice, I'm sure, from your family and other commitments. But we truly appreciate the thoughtfulness. I think that's what I want to underscore. In particular, taking the time to actually go out to every site. I think it's one thing to read a report and hear about the site, but to actually go there, spend the time, really want to give thanks to all the facilitation. I know there were lots of hours put into figuring out how to design that experience to get the most thoughtful feedback possible. So I know everyone did this for free, and we really appreciate your service in helping us make the most thoughtful decisions to just some complicated dilemmas that we're wrestling with. And so we really appreciate it. Thank you.
And I will conclude just by piling on with the thanks. I also want to observe that the first time through a process is often really challenging. And so in your report, I read it last night, it's a great report. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness around the recommendations and here's what you should think about next time. And I think we will listen to that, and it will help the committee that comes after you, because as you've heard, we do have more properties. So I know not everyone could be here tonight, but we have a few we have a certificate for each of you. We're gonna come down and give those to you if you don't mind. And we really, please convey my thanks, our thanks, everyone's thanks to everyone. And go ahead. Go ahead, Jamoka.
And I would the staff, Jody, and then the other consultants, would you also come forward and be a part of it? Because it takes that backbone to kind of move the process.
And can I, if I could have a minute, just to, in response to your comments, I wanted to share one of the things that we struggled with throughout our process was our understanding clearly that our committees and our recommendations, the committee's work and our recommendations was advisory, and that we were going to present recommendations to you, and you will make your final determination. And I just want to note that hearing your comments, hearing Director G's comment, Director Hutchins, about how you're listening, and even when we said this didn't need to come to the committee, but you're like, no, but we want to hear from you. It's encouraging. So it is, it's very nice to hear. It's encouraging, and it's definitely placating our struggles that we had about, well, what's the point? We're just making recommendations. I do hear and see that you're taking our recommendations seriously. So I appreciate that. Serrano. Thank you.
I'm informed that we need to that we will be taking public comment on this item right now. So can we call the speaker cards, please?
We have 6 speakers: Deirdre Moss, Mike Hutchinson, Mike Lowton, Bentap Scott, Asala Olabala,
Hello, my name is Mike Loudon, and I too would like to congratulate the 7-Eleven committee. I was only able to make it to 2 of the meetings, and it was a hard slog. And I'm just here to tell them that even though this board has a checkered past when it comes to facilities spending, and facilities utilization, the community is here to back up their recommendations, and they have our full support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Hutchinson, as somebody who attended nearly every 7-Eleven committee meeting, it's very interesting to hear the school board comment about how next time there should be a school board member there at every meeting. I'm shocked that nobody thought of that 3 months ago. There won't be another 7-Eleven process, especially once we elect a new school board. I think it's interesting that at the same time this is being voted on, there's also an item on the agenda listing off the underutilized classrooms designated under Prop 39 and how there's no coordination between the two lists. You actually did a disservice to the members of the 7-Eleven committee. You didn't give them good directions. And instead, 1 week before or 1 meeting before they're coming to present their report, you actually changed your board policy on selling property that made a lot of their work invalid. Your new policy disregards any recommendations that they made. This has been intentional, and if you try to tell Edward Shands or Tilden CDC as a lame duck school board when 4 of you will be gone within a year, you don't realize what kind of fight you're in for.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Deirdre Moss. I'm a staff member for Councilmember Dan Kolb, who is the council member for the district where the former Piedmont Childhood Development Center is located. I am here, Councilmember Kolb could not be here this evening, but I would like to read an excerpt from a letter that he's written that I can present to you later also. He says, I'm grateful to the 7-Eleven Committee for holding community engagement sessions to hear the desires and concerns of the residents as they relate to the unused properties at issue. A member of my staff attended the community meeting for the former PCDC site. It was apparent to my staff member that the clear majority of those in attendance hoped that the former PCDC site would be used as a permanent home for the Piedmont Avenue Branch Library. The November 20th, 2019 Friends of the Piedmont Avenue Library Steering Committee letter laid out this desire in even more detail. I am in agreement with the 7-Eleven committees and the Piedmont Avenue Library Steering Committee's recommendation that the former site not be declared surplus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Mordecai speaking as an individual. I put it in the wrong slot and didn't get taken. I'd like to speak.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Okay, so the first thing is the frame was incorrect from the beginning. This was state law, as one of the board members has stated. And in the state law, you're supposed to be working with the data that the district provides to come up with what are the surplus and what are not surplus. And the second step is to go out into the community and get feedback. This was a marvelous committee, and it was independent, and it was like herding cats. And cats are independent. They don't want to be herded. They weren't going to be accepting being herded. Now, the other issue was the $174,000 for consultants. The consultants didn't even read the law. They didn't know what the law said. So it's ridiculous. You need to have staff members. You need to have institutional memories. You're running this school district into the ground.
Thank you.
Love Life. I was very disappointed with the recommendation concerning Piedmont. I went to the meeting, and it was overwhelmingly members of the community who live in Piedmont, and there weren't any parents there. The principal identified that she wanted that site to be used for a child development center. And so there was lopsided people who live around the school and live in the city of Piedmont that doesn't have a library, that uses this library and want to continue to have a library. And so I want this to be a child development center because the mandate says the #1 priority is how we can serve children best at any surplus site. So if adults want to use it as a Piedmont library, that's not the #1 priority. And if you look at the library, the Oakland Library's facilities plan, they need $40 million for the main library for renovations. They need $9 to $11 million for a library they want to build in West Oakland, and they don't have the money because they have a $5 million deficit. So all this discussion about that site looks like a child development center. To convert it into a library site, how much money?
Thank you.
Number one priority, children.
Thank you.
Not the people who live around in the community that are not interested in children.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers on this item? Please come forward. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Millicent Embry, and what I was wondering, I think that the people on the 7-Eleven, they did a really great job, but I'm not exactly sure what's in the report because it just came out. I was wondering where you're going to post it so other people, other parents, other teachers, other school board members can actually look at it without having to dig it. So is there a place where it will be posted for the general public to look at it? And another one would be to actually make it so you can highlight maybe what the recommendations are so that it's easy to, read through, because I think that's another thing that would be helpful.
Thank you. The report is posted online with the agenda for this evening, so that's one place it can be found. And then I'm pretty certain that our staff, once we accept it tonight, which we're about to do, our staff can then post it with the 7-Eleven committee on their website.
But since it's such an important piece of information for people who don't know about the 7-Eleven committee or property that's going to be sold, I think that it should be put in a more prominent site, Oakland Unified School District or something like that, and actually saying what it's about, because it is a very important piece, and it's just not about these 5 properties now, but it could be for future properties coming up.
Great. Thank you for the suggestions. Actually, we are not going to vote on this. The report has been presented. We have accepted it, and we will be discussing the report more at our February meetings. So with that, we're going to conclude this item, and we're going to move now to the report from our student directors. Thank you. We're glad to have you here. Happy New Year.
Good evening, board members, superintendents, students, families, and community. The All City Council Student Union Governing Board is excited to share with you all what we have been up to and what we are planning in the next couple of weeks. On December 12, All City Council Student Union held the 3rd high school general meeting hosted by the student leadership at McClymonds. During this meeting, the 41 ACC high school delegates and adult allies from 11 schools, including Oakland Tech, Life Academy, Castlemont, Ojai, Fremont, Street Academy, Skyline, Rudsdale, Mac, Madison, and Midwest were present. As part of this meeting, delegates were able to obtain a better understanding of ACC's focus for the 2019 to 2020 school year. We were able to recap our goal to activate the student power and civic engagement in our process and the next steps with our student power voter registration drive. We also believe this is a powerful year for students with the budget cuts and so much happening in our schools. We want to engage in supporting more funding to our schools, really saving RJ and protecting the safety of us as students. Also, here are some updates of our civic engagement data of the voter registration drive in the high schools. Oakland High, Mac, Tech, Life, Rudsdale is still planned, Midwest is still planned, and we trained 17 student leaders who conducted 49 presentations on the history and power of voting and how to register to vote. So far, we have collected 100+ voter registrations. We will be continuing our efforts throughout the spring. As part of the meeting, student leaders participate in deeper learning breakouts. These breakouts included LCAP and the student budget priorities and the blueprint. Special thank you to Yvette Renteria, OUSD Deputy Chief of Innovation, and her team, as well as Justine Santos from California for Justice, who supports our LCAP Student Advisory Committee, for being present, answering questions, and sharing updates with our students. Our delegates were able to get a better understanding and help inform the principals for budget and decision making for LCAP and give voice to their concerns about the blueprint. We would like to personally give a big appreciation to none other than the MAG House for hosting our best high school meeting yet, as well as the staff who came to be present and hear the recommendation of students.
Moving on, we were also able to hold our general middle school meeting on January 14th, hosted by Brett Hart. Each meeting, we received school reports from the delegates. We then compile those reports to present at the school board meetings. The following is a list of concerns and opportunities at school sites. During our December and January meetings, the schools that turned in their school reports were Edna Brewer, Brett Hart, Elmhurst United, Melrose Leadership Academy, Life Academy, Westlake, and WAMS. Delegates from Edna Brewer noted that they're still working on changing their dress code and currently have a group of people working with the PTSA to address any concerns they have. Brett Hart mentioned many improvements that have been taking place, including less fights, less drama, less disrespect, improvement of school lunch, and more students currently on the honor roll. As for Elmhurst, students are still concerned about the cafeteria food and the graffiti outside of school. One of the improvements they mentioned is having new lockers. Melrose students acknowledged their new electives, including drama, journalism, and leadership. Although they're very excited to take a part in these activities, there are concerns that not all electives are open to every grade. Life Academy delegates also noted that they now have a new science textbooks and are excited to be a part of their Valentine's Day dance of solidarity. I'm sorry, Life Academy, my school, so I'm a little juiced. Westlake highlighted improvements over the last months, currently having less fights, student celebrations, and more positive vibes. Students are meeting weekly to develop an RJ plan for their school. Finally, WAMS delegates are concerned about the bathrooms and are doing student awards to those who demonstrated their leadership. We are excited to announce that our winter Meaningful Student Engagement 2020 retreat was a success. We were able to break out into groups to discuss updates, reflections, and next steps for our focus this year. The breakouts were voter registration, schools and communities first, and restorative justice. We were also able to do some grounding and get training on representative leadership and strong messaging. Our students felt very empowered to see their passion and hard work through their words, motivating them to do the same. Most importantly, students identify ways on how we want to engage immigrant students and students who are not eligible to register to vote in the process. We were able to share our stories on the reasons of why we were doing the work that we do, making us see civic engagement on a much more personal level. Overall, we were fortunate to have an opportunity to get out of Oakland and be in a space where we can ignite our inspiration to continue our work together district-wide and citywide. We are excited to announce that in addition to voter registration, we will also be doing canvassing for schools and communities first and other initiatives that support youth, all starting this month. We encourage everyone to join us, gather just signatures to make sure the ballot includes SCF that will reclaim $12 billion per year for K-12 schools, community colleges, and communities. For flyers, permission slips, or more information on any of the announcements above, please contact All City Council Student Union via Instagram at All City Council OUSD, or email us at denelson.garibo@ousd.org and Micah Smith Dahl at ousd.org, or our Meaningful Student Engagement staff, Aurora Lopez at ousd.org. Thank you.
Thank you to the student board members.
We're not done.
Oh, you're not done. Okay. You guys have a long report tonight.
A long.
Pent-up student reports.
Now we want to take a moment to read a statement in response to why we haven't been present in the previous board meetings and the shutting down of the previous board meetings. Today, we are happy to be back in our elected seats here at our school board meeting. We are honored to be here in this position where we can support and uplift student voice. We acknowledge that for many years, communities have been overlooked. However, as student directors, the merging of Kaiser and Sankofa was an effort to spread the resources back to those communities that have been underserved. It is hard, it is sad, and it is painful. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made, and sometimes we're not in a position to change them. As two black and brown youth growing up in East and West Oakland with less access to education, we take our job heavily. We don't see many students being represented in this space, which is why we feel that our voice is even more important, especially in times where the real problems are decisions being made, including budget cuts and charter approvals. During our last board meeting, we as student directors felt ignored and disrespected. When we tried to speak our point of view, no one, and I mean no one, would turn around to listen to what we had to say. We want more clarity on what is the purpose of shutting down every board meeting. As students of color, we encounter daily negative interactions in our neighborhoods with police without media presence. This issue is very important to us, and I can speak to this based on my own experiences.
In response to the situation between the police and community members, we are disappointed. While it seems that police were purposefully aggravated, there was no excuse to have treated community members this way. Because of the consistent shutdown of every meeting, we feel that it has become dangerous for us as student directors to be present. At the last meeting we attended, we felt attacked when many people came up to us asking us to step down from the stage, and when we tried to express how we felt, we were pressured and we didn't see the need in going down as we had the mic. We felt belittled by adults. Student power is an essential key to the movement of fighting for equality in education. At the end of the day, we as students are the ones that's affected by every decision that the board makes. Being able to put yourself in a position where you can get arrested and not assaulted by an officer is a privilege. Many people within our communities that we serve do not have that privilege. I want everyone here to ask themselves, where was this energy with Roots? Because some of you were there, but those of you who weren't won't feel threatened by us saying this. Where was that same energy? Placing yourself at the front of a radical movement has so much power, but it has to be done correctly, with intentionality and including all impacted groups. Many don't seem on board with this movement, and they have a say in this as well.
We want to hear more from those parents who are not present in these meetings and uninformed about the decisions that are currently being made for them. Our historically underserved communities and schools have always been pushed to the side. This decision to merge the schools was an attempt to give resources and supports to a school that has been neglected for so long. Overall, we want to hear every person in the building, but if that's not even allowed, how are we as students going to be heard? We respect the purpose, but we don't see the cost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, student directors. Director Yee, we're going to go to 3 minutes on this. I want to move the agenda along. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, student board members, for that thoughtful and personal comment. Unfortunately, my comment was on your earlier report. You mentioned the School and Community First initiative, and I just wanted to be sure with our general counsel present that it is appropriate for us to have that from the dais, and because I think there's some prohibitions for us as elected board members to weigh in, I believe, but I just wanted to get some clarity about it, especially regarding school board members. But before you comment, I thank you for your endorsement of the Schools and Community First.
I believe the board has passed a resolution endorsing the measure, and so therefore comments by student board members are appropriate.
Okay. And for the rest of the audience, could you explain then what School and Community First does and how it would impact the schooling for the students that you represent?
Basically, Schools and Communities First is an initiative that will be on the ballot in 2020 that voters will get to vote on, that will bring $12 billion back into our schools and communities. So that's things like taking care of potholes in our communities, taking care of, we don't have an appropriate gym, whatever it is that
saving RJ.
Yeah, saving RJ. A lot of things that we need in our communities throughout California as a state, going back to everyone. So.
Thank you. Did anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Director Hinton Hodge?
Yeah, my comments were actually on the report. And it was around, when you talked about registering folks to vote, was that more adults or was it young people? Are you guys doing a campaign around high school students getting registered to vote? Did I just make that up, or I didn't know what I heard?
No, it's basically a ballot to help youth register to vote. Right now, we're helping like many schools in our district get registered to vote. So we're giving out presentations and to pre-register to vote.
And pre-registered.
Right.
But there was 100. That was
Right,
really-
100 and plus.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Is there any more support around that? Do you? I don't know if that's just, is that a campaign that you'll continue to be doing?
Yes, it's continued
definitely.
through the spring. We have a lot of schools that do need more support, and
Great.
Yeah.
That's really great, because I feel like Director London and just other people, I think Director Sin previously, like we all just talked about, what I used to, at graduations, I would like give out voter registrations to like all the graduates. So I just think I really appreciate you being proactive around that, because that's critical. Captured audience, really important time. Your words were courageous. I feel like I'm always asking, do you need anything? Do you need anything? Do you need anything? So I don't know if there's another way to say that, or if I didn't say it at whatever moment or time, but definitely want to be available. And I know that, again, I've been in the situation where I haven't always agreed with student directors and got called out for not agreeing with student directors, but I feel like I will show up and I will listen, and I will move alongside of whatever it is that you need to do. Your safety is first and foremost, and so oftentimes I think that is important to know that, like, psychologically, just what you were saying, right? There's an impact that some people don't even know because they have so much privilege that they don't even understand, like the psychic energy that is actually happening at times when they hiss at you and do those types of things, right? And so I know a shout out to Raquel as well as Aurora, because I know that those are at least the two adults that I know that tend to like hold you all and hold space for you all, and help you process in this particular way that is amazing. And I hope when I grow up I get to be able to do it just as courageously as you all have. So thank you for being back, and I hope you don't have to go away.
Great. Director Torres, and then we'll go to the superintendent.
So I definitely want to say thank you for not only your report, supporting the initiative that's going to be on the ballot for more funding. At your age, to have so many things that you're thinking about and that you're putting energy and time on when you could just be going to school, doing your homework, and then hanging out with your friends, it's very encouraging to have you up here. And I've always been extremely blown away by all of the board members over all the years I've been up here. But I also want to say that the ability to share those very personal words at the end, and I know you went really fast, so I would, as a person who hears it once but also wants to read it, I hope that you would share your messages via email with us, because it went really fast. But overall, I felt that what you were saying was very personal and also painful, to share what it's like, and as a Latina, to grow up getting pulled over by the police for no reason, driving my friends home when I was 16, and really hating cops for a long time. And then I became a prosecutor, and actually still don't really care for many police because of that experience as a prosecutor. But the reality is that you shared something so personal, painful, and that's, I think, with the controversy right now of all of the protests and our meetings moving upstairs, it is difficult to be a board member, and the fact that you're calling it out front and center is a huge sign of maturity. And you're not saying we're right, they're right, anybody's right. The reality is you're just saying what needs to be said, because there's right and wrong in everything, right? And so I definitely just really appreciate you for putting that into tonight's meeting, as we've been able to get through a lot longer of a meeting here in the public. I prefer to be down here than upstairs. I don't find that appropriate, but nonetheless, I just want you to know that, as Director Hinton Hodge said, we are here for you as board members as well. We're a team, right? Even though you're the student board members, and you can always reach out
I don't want you to not come, and I don't want you to not feel safe. And so at the end of the day, it's not just your physical safety, but it's also your emotional safety.
Right.
That what happened with arrests and so on with protesters, as opposed to you just walking home from school and being subject to harassment by law enforcement, is a whole nother story. And so that cuts really deep. And I hope that everybody understood what you were saying, who's here tonight ready to protest, because they don't have to walk home and worry about the police pulling them over or stopping them.
Okay, let's go now to the superintendent. Let's go now to the superintendent. Let's go now to the superintendent.
So just to
Let's go now to
just
the superintendent.
President London,
We're going
and
to-
also to the student directors, we want to center this on you and not them. So again,
We're
I'm
going to
always like, can
recess
we
the meeting
stay?
right now. We are now officially in recess. We're returning from recess. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, on the roll call for to establish a quorum, Student Director Smith Dahl, Student Director Garibo, Director Ng.
Here.
Okay, Director Hinton Hodge,
Present.
Director Yee, Director Torres, Director Harris, Vice President Gonzalez, President London.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. We are now on item J in our agenda. We've moved around a bit tonight, but we're on item J, which is submission of speaker cards and modifications to the agenda. Colleagues, do you have any modifications to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go to Director Harris and then Director Hinton Hodge.
It's not a modification. I would like to ask that the meeting be adjourned in honor of Maisha Singleton. She is the mother that was killed by a reckless driver on 98th Avenue. She has 7 children and 4 in the district. And just so folks know, she was very busy, but I learned today that she volunteered 3 days a week at Korematsu Discovery Academy, and then another 2 days at one day at Sojourner Truth, and then one day at Elmhurst. So she was a very active member of the community. They all miss her, and they all have dedications in her honor. And they also have started a GoFundMe page, which I planned on just sharing with my board colleagues. If you can make a contribution, if folks in the community want to make a contribution, please contact me or the school at Elmhurst. They have that information. But I just ask that we adjourn in honor of parent and volunteer for the district, Maisha Singleton.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that, for reminding us of that. Director Hinton Hodge, did you have a modification to the agenda?
Well, no, it was a bit of a conversation and talking about, and I'm not looking at the item, which was around the whistleblower piece, and I'm just wondering, because the author is not here, would we want to table that for now? Or do you feel like it's necessary to move it forward? I just want to be conscious of the author.
I'm going to look at our, I don't think the general counsel's in the room. I don't know yet, so let's that's item T2. So when we get to T2, we can start the conversation and see if we want to hold it until Director Gonzalez is at the meeting. Okay, thank you. Those are that concludes item J. We have concluded item K, which was the student board member report. We have concluded. Now we're on item L, the president's report. I do not have a report this evening. Item M is the superintendent's report, which we started with tonight, which was honoring Mr. Oscar Wright, one of our elders. We now come to item N, which is comment by collective bargaining units. If I understand that Mr. Brown is ill tonight from the Oakland Education Association and cannot be here, but that one of his executive committee members is coming instead. Welcome, Ms. Serrano, I believe, and please come forward. And if there are other, just one second, if there are other represented leadership of other unions who wish to speak, this would be the time to come forward. Welcome. Please begin.
Have a few updates on our behalf. First, the OEA.
If Ms. Serrano, if you could pause for a minute. The audio is not working in the room that we're in right now, so we want to make sure we can hear what you have to say. I apologize. Can you test it, please? Can you start again?
Hello?
Oh,
Can you hear
perfect.
me?
Let's go. Start again.
Hi, my name is Velma Serrano, and I'm a transitional kindergarten teacher. I'm also an executive board member here on behalf of OEA. So the OEA would like to give their condolences to the family of Maisha Singleton, dedicated mother, OUC mother, as was stated, an anti-violence advocate. So we just wanted to have actually a moment of silence on her behalf and honor her memory. So I'm going to take a couple seconds right now just to silence in honor of her memory. So given tonight also the 7-11 report, which I actually served on. I was the teacher stakeholder. I would actually like to personally read the OEA resolution that the executive board voted on unanimously. Move that due to the lack of a comprehensive plan to utilize OUSD in the early childhood to adult education programs. OEA opposes the sale of any surplus properties. And that is all that I have on behalf of OEA today. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Singleton.
Thank you.
Serrano, excuse me, Ms. Serrano. Are there other labor unions who would like to speak at this time? Okay. That was item N. We're now on item O, which is public comment on all of the items that we have considered thus far in the agenda, items A through N. If there's anybody who would like to offer public comment, you will have 1 minute. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Hutchinson.
Well, it's good that I have 1 minute, even though I'm the only speaker. And you would know who signed up to speak if you would actually take the speaker cards with you upstairs. And so this is, I think, the 8th meeting in a row where you have scurried upstairs for no real apparent reason. You have more people here than we even have downstairs. And so I think your reports, again, or your lack thereof, show the community how serious you are about the job. With all due respect, it was great to have an award honoring Oscar Wright, but that was not a superintendent's report. Where is the report on what's happening with our water quality or the fiscal vitality or the other things we've been promised that would be in the report? Nothing. And instead, what you do is, in the middle of the reports, you run upstairs away from the community. The practice at a school board meeting and at any public meeting is if people are being disruptive, then they're asked to leave. That's why the police is here. The practice has never been that the school board runs upstairs and has a meeting in closed session and denies the community access. Why have we not been invited? Why have we not been invited upstairs to join you? Why don't you come back downstairs and face the community that actually elected you?
Are there other people who would like to speak on the items on the agenda? Welcome, Mr. Mordecai. Thank you.
Speaking as a individual, and I'm not gonna speak at this time. I'll wait till public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Eric Pettengill, Oakland resident, teacher, parent. I am mostly going to just comment on N and remind get it on the public record essentially that most of you won't be here. 4 of the seats that will be vacated next year. In addition to these collective bargaining units that are all coming back to the table, OEA will be back at the table in another year. So for the superintendent, the board members who will be returning, in particular, I hope you really think about your ongoing legacy and your commitment to the teachers and students and community here, rather than to the interests that seem to be pushing this blueprint for quality schools that for some reason you can't seem to let go of or to put on pause. So I do want to remind folks that in addition to all the other labor classes that you'll be going into negotiations with, a reminder that you will be back at the table with OEA very soon. And so I really hope that you'll do your best to show, especially those of you that are...
Thank you. Is there anyone, would you like to offer public comment? Go ahead, you have 1 minute. Please introduce yourself. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to offer public comment at this time on the items that have been on the agenda previously? Okay. I do not see anyone who actually wants to speak, so we will move on now to item P, which is adoption of the general consent report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent report?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hinton Hodge, seconded by Director Harris. Is there public comment on the general consent report? Is the mic, I don't think they really. Is there anyone who would like to offer public comment on the general consent report? Okay, can we turn on the microphone and give these people a chance to offer public comment on the general consent report? There are some children there. Okay?
Excuse me.
All right.
Hi, my name is Marco Allen. I go to Kaiser Elementary and I'm a second grader. You can't just go around closing schools. Imagine if you were a kid.
At this point, you need to be addressing the items that we're about to vote on. Do you have a comment on those items? If you have a comment on those items, then we can take your public comment.
We can speak whatever we want.
Okay, this is not relevant, so we're going to move on now.
Hey.
This is not germane to the item at hand. Mr. Hutchinson, did you want to speak to the general consent report? If you do, please come forward.
So it's interesting how even the children who attend meetings now get disrespected. There's other ways to handle things, and maybe if we had some real educators on the school board, we'd have a different way of treating and engaging with our students. When it comes to the consent report, there's specifically two things that really need to be focused on. First is P9, which is a personal service contract between OUSD and Lucid Partnerships, which again pays 6 months at $192,000 for this outside company to provide the services of a CFO. Why have we outsourced the CFO? Why is the CFO now costing nearly $400,000 over a year? And why has their contract been extended when originally part of their contract was to find the permanent CFO? And if the CFO is managing the budget, that means we don't have a district employee even overseeing our budget. And the person this outsourced CFO reports to is our senior business officer, Preston Thomas, who has no business experience. Maybe this is why we don't know how to manage our budget. The other item that needs to be called out is P45, which is the list of underutilized.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson.
Which is the list of underutilized.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. That was your time. You had 1 minute. Thank you. Is there anyone else downstairs who would like to offer public comment on the consent report? I see Mr. Pettengill. Can we let Mr. Pettengill approach the microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric Pettengill, Oakland resident, teacher, parent. I'd like to comment on P45 as well. In that document, it is expressly noted about a 2012 ruling that explicitly states how this district is allowed to consider the impact co-locations and so forth will have. But for some reason, you don't do that. It's in your own report here on your charter schools from your own general counsel, in particular those cases, the 2012 one and the Chester, I forget the other lawsuit. Both of those lawsuits clearly show that you don't have to do this plan. You don't have to force some of these co-locations. Now, I know the school closures is not directly related because that's a bigger part of the blueprint picture and plan. But as far as the co-location piece is concerned, I was happy to see that most of the sites were not given a single site recommendation because it isn't there.
Great.
It's
Thank
also
you.
very clear
Thank
to
you.
me that your list is inaccurate. For example, if you would let me
Thank you,
finish
Mr.
my one
Pettengill.
statement.
I believe
For
your time
example,
has
the site I
expired.
work at.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to offer public comment on the general consent report? If you do, please come forward. Okay, can we call the roll, please?
On the roll call to adopt the general consent report, this is report number 1.
Thank you. Yes, general consent report 1.
Director Ng,
Yes.
Director Hinton Hodge,
Yes.
Director Yee,
Yes.
Director Torres,
Yes.
Director Harris, Vice President Gonzalez, not on the phone. Okay. President London.
Yes.
The motion's adopted.
Great, thank you. We will move now to item, this is the second general consent report, item P1. Director.
And before you proceed, Madam President, Director
Yeah, I was
Torres
going to
needs
ask Director Torres if she wanted to make a statement.
So I would be abstaining from this item based on the fact that I serve on the Board of Directors for Girls Inc. of Alameda County.
Great, and I believe you should leave the room at this moment. That's how the law does it, so. Okay, is there a motion to adopt the general consent report number 2? Moved by Director Harris. I will second it. Is there any public comment on general consent report number 2? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hutchinson.
Seeing none. I'll finish what I was saying before with the consent report. To have an underutilization list in there and to vote tonight in the consent report to offer classrooms at 6 schools to 3 charter schools, including
Mr. Hutchinson, at this point, the 2 items involve agreements between some of our schools and Girls Inc. of Alameda College. That's the item we're voting on now.
Is this really how you're going to use my 1 minute when I'm the only one speaking on it?
This
You're
is
going to chastise me?
I need to ask you to direct your comments to the item at hand.
I am directing my comments to that. If you would stop interrupting me, I would make the point clear. So hopefully my clock will restart. Just like at the last item that was voting on the underutilization list and the offer for Prop 39 to give to these charter schools, which includes new schools for the first time, this measure also that are in P1 are very improper to do business this way. You have started using the consent report as a catch-all for everything. And it shows when you have P1 that the district staff and the school board could not even put it in one consent report in a timely manner, that you had to divide it up into 2. So my question would be, for the 49 items on P and P1, how many of the school board members ever even read those items? And I'd love to have a real discussion about what's
Thank you,
really contained
Mr.
in this consent
Hutchinson.
report.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Can we call the roll, please?
On the roll call for the adoption of General Consent Report number 2, known as P1. Director Ng?
Yes.
Director Hinton-Hodge?
Yes.
Director Yee?
Yes.
Director Harris? Yes. And President London?
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. At this point, we'll move now to item Q, which is public comment on any item that is not on the agenda. If you would like to offer public comment, please come to the microphone. Welcome, Ms. McLean.
Hello. I just I'm serving on an SSC. I'm working in 2 Oakland Public Schools right now. And the list of the number of rooms available in the schools has been inaccurate in 3 of these sites. And it bothers me to see something coming out and being approved that is not correct. And I just feel I feel that it's not being handled properly. And I think we need to do some double checking with the principals and go back to the school sites. You're not counting the special ed classes that are being used. It's not correct, and it makes me angry, and I try to stick with Oakland, but it's getting harder and harder to do that.
Thank you.
Mike Hutchinson, and of course I agree with Ms. McLean, my 10th grade world cultures teacher. The thing I wanted to talk about here in this time, where you can't tell me what I'm supposed to talk about and not talk about, is today I just got a lawsuit that has been filed against OUSD forwarded to me. Case number RG 19012087. And it's a whistleblower lawsuit where in 2017 a district employee in facilities was fired when they started asking questions about the financial irregularities in that department and in Measure J. In this lawsuit, they cite by name former district employees like Vernon Howe and current district employees like Curtis Saricki as part of this conspiracy that when people tried to ask questions about financial irregularities and overspending and questionable spending in millions of dollars, they were preparing a PowerPoint presentation for the school board, and all of a sudden they were fired before they could make that presentation. Why has the school board not talked to the community at all about this? In the lawsuit, it makes clear that the school board was put on notice that this was happening in 2017.
Thank you,
No
Mr.
actions have been
Hutchinson.
taken, and this is the financial irregularity of our dollars.
Thank
What
you,
are
Mr.
you doing to
Hutchinson.
manage the money, and when are these people mentioned in this lawsuit going to be fired?
Is there anyone else who would like to offer public comment on items not on the agenda? Welcome, Mr. Mordecai.
About the board, 4 people on the board passed Jerry Brown's Oakland School for the Arts renewal. And one of them was appointed, when Jerry Brown was governor, was appointed to a committee, and they didn't recuse themselves. Now, what would happen if that person had been conscious that the moral and correct and right thing to do would have been to excuse themselves like they didn't do it? There would only have been 3 votes. You wouldn't have had enough votes to pass. You couldn't pass for it or against it. You didn't have enough votes. Then the time would run out. What would happen then? Well, the charter-friendly State Board of Education established a regulation that says in that situation, if you don't either get enough votes for or against, it's automatically renewed. Now that is charter-friendly. This school board should be actively working to get that ed code changed.
Thank you, Mr. Mordecai. Thank you. Okay, is there any further public comment on non-agenda items? All right, we're going to move on then. We're now on item R, public hearings. We do not have any public hearings tonight. Item S, unfinished business. There is no unfinished business this evening. We're now on item T, new business. We're going to go to item T1, 200049. This is an update on our English language learner master plan. Superintendent, did you want to introduce this item or?
The ELL master
Yes,
plan?
yes.
Good evening, board and community. At this time, I would like to introduce our Executive Director of English Language Learner Multilingual Achievement Office, Nicole Knight, and she will provide an overview of what the master plan is and updated changes.
Good evening, board directors. So again, Nicole Knight, Executive Director of ELMA, English Language Learner Multilingual Achievement, and here today to bring some proposed revisions to our current English Language Learner Master Plan, which was adopted by this board in November of 2016. And just before I begin, I always like to start with our why, which is our students. I'd like to recognize some of our most recent English Language Learner graduates. These amazing young people graduated from Redesdale Newcomer Academy just in December. And, you know, of course, high school graduation is always a huge accomplishment, but it's even more extraordinary for these young people, many who are here without their parents, juggling work and school while learning English as a second or even third language and adjusting to life in a new country. So the ELL Master Plan is designed to ensure we have the quality programming and instruction that guarantees an opportunity for each of our 11,600 English language learners to eventually cross the stage with the skills needed to thrive in college, career, and community. As our English language learner and specifically our newcomer population continues to grow and shape our student body, this work is increasingly important and central to our success as a district. So I appreciate the attention and time of this board to look at some needed revisions to the plan. In terms of what our plan is, we think about it as our, operational handbook for principals and other site leaders. It does 3 basic things. Provides the how of the board policy of English language learner services. It stipulates the legal requirements to serve our English learners, and it goes beyond these legal requirements to focus on quality instruction and program. And I just want to say that the master plan is different from the roadmap to English language learner achievement that I have provided updates on this board. That roadmap is the central office strategic plan to get to the conditions needed and supports needed so that site leaders can implement the ELL master plan at their sites. So just to make that distinction. A little bit about the contents. Oh, there it is. Okay, a little bit about the contents of the plan. There are 4 chapters. The first chapter lays out our procedures and policies that follow an English language learner student's journey from identification as a language learner, placement in an appropriate program, to ultimately reclassification as fluent English proficient. The second chapter outlines our instructional framework, guidance, and resources for professional development, our language program offerings, which includes dual language, newcomer, long-term English learner supports, the minimum progress expectations for our English language learner students, and interventions schools should employ should students not meet those minimum progress expectations. The third chapter was co-authored by our family engagement partners and outlines the governance structures at the site and central levels as it relates to our English language learners. And finally, our fourth chapter outlines central office and site level systems to monitor, evaluate, and hold ourselves accountable for the instructional and services, resource allocation, and the progress and achievement of our Ls. So very briefly, I just want to outline a summary of the revisions in this amended master plan. And just to say, the amendments are necessary to make sure that our plan is up to date with changes in state law and policy. So districts are required to have an English language learner master plan, are expected to revisit and revise every 3 to 5 years to make sure the plan is up to date. So the first category of change fully aligns our practices to Proposition 58. And if you remember, Prop 58 was passed in November of 2016 and reverses Proposition 227, which essentially prohibited bilingual education for close to 20 years and only allowed exceptions if parents signed an annual waiver. So Prop 58 not only recognizes the value of bilingual education, but puts into place goals and policies that actively encourage districts to offer multilingual programming that builds on our students' linguistic assets and prepares them for success in our global community. While our 2016 master plan was already fully aligned to the values of Prop 58, there are 2 needed changes to our regulations to comply with the new law. First of all, at the time of enrollment, families are no longer required to sign an annual waiver to enroll their child. And secondly, we have new procedures required by Prop 58 that consider parent input on the language acquisition programs that we offer, including but not limited to dual language programs. Requests at the site level must be documented, and once a threshold is reached, the district must consider the request and respond according to a detailed timeline outlined in the master plan. The second set of amendments relates to governance structures. Our site English Language Learner Committees, or CELs, replaces what was formerly known as ELACs. The revisions to our master plan clarifies guidance for forming and maintaining CELs and more clearly outlines roles and responsibilities, and you can find the details in the plan. Secondly, it clarifies a new regulation that allows a site to hand over the duties of CELs to the SSC, or the School Site Council, while an English language learner representative on the SSC is always recommended. In this case, it would be required, along with the inclusion of time on each agenda to address L issues at the site. And finally, the last set of changes has to do with a new language proficiency test from the state. So the LPAC, which stands for English Learner Proficiency Assessment for California, replaces the old CELT. There are 2 LPAC tests. The initial is given once at the time of enrollment, and the summative is given annually until a student demonstrates fluency in English. In terms of content, the LPAC is a more rigorous test, and the highest level score is a 4, is now required for our English learners to reclassify as fluent, a higher bar than previous criteria, and we can see that higher criteria reflected in our lower reclassification rates. Finally, the state has changed its policy on how to approach errors to the home language survey. The home language survey or the HLS, is completed by parents at the point of enrollment. If they indicate that their student speaks a language other than English, that's what triggers the initial LPAC to determine if the student is an English learner. At times, the parent will claim that completion of the HLS was incorrect, and in the past, the state did not allow any changes to be made. Now, parents may request a change be considered as long as it happens before the first annual LPAC, which is usually given in February or March. There are some other semantical changes that are pretty insignificant in nature, so those are the most substantive changes to the plan. And that concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments.
Colleagues, any questions or comments? Director Torres, let's do 3 minutes and see how that goes.
So I guess a couple of, thank you for the report, first of all, and I'm very happy about Prop 58. Is there any place where that's been carried out as far as parents asking, and well, do parents even know, right, that they have that right, that if there are a certain number, percentage, they can require that the district now follow the law and put together the program? I know it takes time because it's like a 1-year study session to then figure out how to implement based on Prop 58, the new law. Is there any place that that's happening yet, or do we have any data around that since it's so new?
Right. So what has happened is the clerical procedures have been in place, and our clerical staff at school sites have been trained and have the forms in place should a parent request or inquire into the opportunity to provide input. So far, there has not been any submissions.
But are we
to date.
telling parents
So
proactively?
We have to do that communication, and so we need a communication plan around that, as well as the district level. We are also required at least once a year to actively solicit input from our community at the level of PSAC around our language program offerings across the system. And so that's something that we can look forward to in our PSAC agenda forthcoming this year.
Okay.
I think that will help and be a form of communication for parents to know that they can also request at the site level.
And then with regard to the testing that became more rigorous and that you have to get a 4, is it possible that the prior testing was simply giving students a handicap that if it was too simple, then they weren't really excelling in their education because it wasn't proving that they were really ready for the English mastery? Or is it, what is your opinion on this change in regard to the testing to become reclassified? Is it going to make it extremely hard? Because one of the concerns my parents will tell me in my schools is that if my student hasn't mastered English young enough, when they get to high school, they'll never get into AP courses or honors courses or things that are rigorous enough to get them into better universities versus just going to a 2-year college. And parents are recognizing that. This is just, it's like what we were saying earlier with Mr. Wright. We're tracking black students back in the 60s after desegregation and still not letting them go to college track. And now are we doing the same thing with English learners, that they'll never get to a good college, presumably whatever you define a good college by, because they haven't been reclassified, and now it's even harder. So what do you think about the new testing, or what are your thoughts? I mean, I just want to be able to get our parents ready to force their students to study harder so they could reclass earlier.
I think that in our office we're of two minds, and one is we appreciate the new LPAC tests aligned to the Common Core, and there's a stronger demand on academic levels of English, and the CELT, kind of mixed social and academic English. So it is, we appreciate that about the test. On the other hand, we know that in our previous reclassification rates, our RFEPs, or our reclassified students, are some of our strongest academic performers. And so we were not concerned that our previous reclassification criteria was too lenient. And so, but it does, create some urgency for us to make sure that language is really being taught in the content areas and giving our students access to those academic levels of English. So.
Okay, thank you.
Director Yee.
Thank you, and it's really overwhelming how comprehensive and detailed the plan is. So thank you. My comment is regarding the transformation that Measure End is creating in our high schools. And if there is any, I just did a quick scan through, is there any mention in your master plan about the vision for EL instruction when we have career academies and when we have newcomers in those career academies? Could you refer me to where that would be in the plan?
There's no specific mention of. It sounds like you would like mention of that. I think where you would see that is in our strategic plan, our roadmap to English language learner achievement. So that's really the central office work that we want to see, and really thinking about how does integrated English language development as well as multilingual programming fit into the structure of our pathway. And so that is work that we are doing, but there's not explicit guidance in the master plan.
Well, so do you think that it would be worthwhile to have something like that as an addendum into the master plan? I mean, I'm thinking of two areas in specifics, like many of the high schools would have significant number of newcomers, so the career academies are not necessarily accessible to them. And there's a struggle in the school to determine whether there should be a pathway or an early intervention for language development so that they can access it or something along that line. And secondly, as we were talking earlier, whether there's some advantage to being EL in career pathways, if career pathways could be contextualized around second language proficiency. So because it's such a great master plan, I would hate for it not to consider some place in there, either as an addendum or something, because otherwise I don't see the kind of guidance. This seems to be primarily guidance for elementary and middle school, and I don't see any guidance at the high school level. And so that's just a friendly question.
Yeah, and that's a fair comment and something that we consider in future revisions. What I'll say is that the master plan has over 150 links, and so if you download the PDF copy, then it will allow you to access links. And some of the links that we have is around entry and exit criteria for newcomer programming, and what we need to see our newcomers, but also our exiting newcomers moving into a more mainstream environment, what some of their experiences should be. So there's certainly work to do to further articulate what that looks like in the pathway structure, and so that is feedback that we'll take in, but there is guidance that is available, and I can follow up with you.
The main reason for me on this, just going back to it, is because it is a master plan, it looks so professional, it's going to be likely to be durable through a cycle, and I think if there aren't those considerations, especially with your career academies, it could be an oversight when the master plan is used at the high school level. The only consideration would be what to do with newcomers rather than what to do with people who are bilingual. So that would be my encouragement.
Thank you.
But other than that, I think everything else is there. I thumbed through it a couple times to see if I missed it.
Thank you. Anybody else have it? Director Harris, thank you.
Thank you for the report. I had a couple questions more about the kind of how things are going in the newcomer, and perhaps you can provide some of this information at a different time. Wanted to understand how school assignments work for newcomers. I don't know if I just anecdotally recognize an imbalance. I see more newcomers at Castlemont than Oakland Tech, and down the line. So as we go farther east, I see just a larger concentration of newcomers and don't see as much concentration in the north. My second question is, how did the reductions of last year impact your ability to serve newcomers? Are there specific pain points that you saw last year? And again, as we are on the eve of more reductions, how are you preparing to support the growing number of newcomers. So it looks like every 2 years we're getting about 200 more newcomers. So how will we support those folks, those new students, with with fewer resources?
So in terms of placement, just at a high level, and would be happy to come back and provide more details. We are at a tipping point in our enrollment for particularly, well, middle and high school newcomers. Our theory of action, starting about 6 or 7 years ago when we were starting to see an increase in newcomers, was to designate a small number of programs across our city so we can really invest resources intensively in a small number of sites and make sure that that staff was really well trained, that resources were available to students and not spread thin across the city. But since then, we have grown from a place where 5 years ago or so, 1 in every 10 high school student was a newcomer. Now we're moving to close to 1 in every 5 high school student is a newcomer. And so we need to be looking at a model where we have newcomer programs in most of our high schools, if not all of our high schools. And we are moving towards that starting next year. And so we can, you can expect to see newcomer programming at all of our comprehensive high schools to begin with, and then some of our other schools. So that's one thing. But what we do know is that our families are looking for the most part, specialized programming that is going to meet their needs and include wraparound services. And so that does lead to a resource question. The way that we have been able to provide resources, there is a tremendous amount of fundraising and external funding to supplement that has allowed us to do what we have done. It never feels like enough, but we know that that's been incredibly helpful. So we will be challenged to think about, how we can provide these additional resources across more schools. And that's just where we are working with high school leaders to help them, think about their master schedule and how to create systems and supports that include supports for newcomers, but I think it's going to be an ongoing question. I don't think that recent cuts have specifically hit our work with newcomers because of the growing need and population, that those resources have been somewhat protected, and there's been, as I said, a significant amount of additional external funding. Moving forward, I would advocate that we need to think about continuing to resource this area of work, which includes our training of teachers. We're going to have many more educators who are going to have newcomers in their classroom and are not yet equipped to serve them. And so the investment of time and resources in their professional development and training is going to be really critical.
Director Hinton-Hodge, did you have any questions? Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item?
If there's no public comment, I have just
There
one
is
other.
public comment, Director Yee. Let's hear from Mr. Mordecai.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mordecai.
Jim Mordecai. It just struck me that I read something about this gentleman, I think up in Humboldt. The native language was starting to be lost, and he actually was a teacher in public schools who developed a curriculum, and then the students were starting to learn their native language, which was, as the older people get old and disappear, then they lose the language. We have some newcomers that are in common. They have like a derivation of a Mayan language that are coming in. So as you get these influx of newcomers, do you plan somehow to, you say you're going to train people and you can tell something about where they came, but how about, is there anything going to be done about capturing their language? And some of those students that go into the world of work, and if they're bilingual in a language that's not Spanish but is a native language to their area, anyhow, I just point that out, that sometimes we see this as a problem when it might be a positive. if not only that you're teaching the culture, but that you're utilizing an influx of students with a new skill. They have a skill of a native language.
Thank you, Mr. Mordecai. Are there any further public comments? Okay. Is this, it's not clear to me whether this is a voting item or this is a first read. Can someone clarify that for me? It's a vote. Okay, then we should have had a motion. Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved by Director Torres, seconded by Director Hinton Hodge. Can we call the roll, please?
Director Ng?
Yes.
Director Hinton Hodge?
Yes.
Director Yee?
Yes.
Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Harris? Yes. President London?
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. We're going to move now to item T2, 20-0019. This is a first read on a whistleblower policy. I'm going to ask our General Counsel, Josh Daniels, if he can come up and give us an overview of this policy. Thank you.
Good evening, Josh Daniels, General Counsel. This is a new policy. It's the first read of a new policy, the whistleblower protection policy. Vice President Gonzalez has been the one that has really been pushing it, and she and I have been going back and forth on some of the language around it. Also, thanks to Director Torres, the grand jury response by the district added language that identified this policy as something that the board would do in response. I'm happy to answer any questions about what it covers or how it would work, but it's generally speaking fairly straightforward. It tracks sort of its origins come out of LAUSD and their whistleblower protection policy, although tweaked to our purposes. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Director Torres.
So my questions in regard to practicing law and this kind of lending itself to something that has to do with deadlines or having to take certain actions. My goal was to see if this policy shouldn't have some revisions around some structure that a person files a claim or a grievance that ex-employee or my boss did something really odd, like giving somebody overtime when they weren't allowed or whatever, right? And that there be a timeline that they be acknowledged for the receipt of that claim, maybe 15 days, something quick. And then thereafter, that maybe another timeline would be that within 30 days, there be an assignment to a third-party investigator, right? Because we never know who they're complaining about. They're complaining about superintendent, they're complaining about us, they're a board, or they're complaining about you. But some kind of timelines seem to be missing. The other thing would be that the investigation be completed within, 60 days, 90 days, or an extension, depending on how many people have to be interviewed. If it's a big deal that they're whistleblowing about versus something smaller that is a matter of interviewing a few people. So, and then ultimately an appeal. What's the appeal process if the employee says, you guys are just laughing at this and this is just how you guys do things here and everybody is going back to business as usual? Wouldn't they want to be able to appeal it to, and then to whom? Outside of the district. Are they appointed an attorney? Does it go through the union? I just felt like there was some detail missing, because I know when I was a county council, there was an issue that came up, and I remember getting involved with whoever the union rep was, and it was very structured. Like, you had so many days to respond, and then you had a hearing, and then you know, somebody was appointed to oversee that hearing. It's pretty detailed, and so this was missing a little bit of the how-to, although I appreciate the policy, since I have been, asking Director Gonzalez, when is that coming? Can I see it? I want to weigh in on it, and then here it is. So I definitely think, though, that when someone goes out on a limb to be a whistleblower, as we know with cases that actually come out and are more well-known big whistleblower situations at big companies, like these airplanes that are crashing, and now we're seeing that people knew, but they hid it. We wouldn't want that person to feel like they're putting their butt on the line for something that needs to change, and then slowly we're going to get around to it because we have so much going on. This is not the place where it can go slow, right? Or it'll just be never utilized, and it'll just be in a drawer somewhere because people won't take it serious, in my opinion. It's just another policy.
So a couple of follow-up questions, if I may, just make sure I'm
Yeah.
capturing it right.
Yeah.
So there's one of the things that I struggled with as sort of crafting this was the distinction between the whistleblower information
Correct.
and the retaliation against the whistleblowing.
Right.
So most of what this focuses on, this policy is currently drafted, is the protection against retaliation. So not necessarily investigating the whistleblowing itself, right? So I think that, I'm a whistleblower and I assume that, employee X is, I don't know, embezzling funds or whatever.
Right.
I whistleblow
Right.
against that employee. This doesn't, for the most part, at least right now, cover what happens
Right.
when I whistleblow.
Sure.
What it covers is if I whistleblow and somebody else
I
comes
can't lose my job. Right.
and retaliates against me, what the investigation would be of that retaliation. So I want to understand, in terms of the timeline, are you interested in a timeline around following up on the whistleblowing or following up on the complaint about retaliation of the whistleblowing, or both?
Well, it's probably both, but I hear you. And so one thing I also know from different employees in the district is that for years the board passes policies and no one deals with the administrative regulations.
That was my
And
next question.
many employees that now don't even work here because they're so frustrated, there needs to be administrative regulations, and maybe that's where it states, how the protection happens to prevent retaliation, which is part of the actual policy of how someone actually whistleblows in the sense, or makes their claim, is in the sense that it's confidential, it's swift, there's an investigation that's equally swift, it's a third party, and then hopefully it wraps up and something is better, and that person continues to go to work every day not worried about everybody else finding out. Because the faster it goes, the better off, versus if something is drawn out, they might feel like, oh, yeah, the retaliation is just that nobody's doing anything and they're just ignoring me. That could be seen as the retaliation, like we're just going to cover that up by doing nothing. So I don't know. It's complicated. I hear what you're
Okay.
saying.
So Director Torres,
But thank you.
let me clarify. Are you asking for specific changes in the policy that we're considering tonight?
As I understand it, President Lennon, is that I think a lot of those pieces could be addressed in an AR. I think it's a really good suggestion, which, so perhaps we could check in about what that would include. And I think that unless there are, certainly if there are changes that Director Torres, you or the other one would like to see, happy to add. But I think a lot of what you're talking about is best addressed in the AR.
Great. Does anyone else have any comments on this first read of the whistleblower policy? Is there any public comment on the whistleblower policy? Okay. So this will come back to us. Is this going to come back to us on February 12th or?
Yeah, I mean, given that there's no changes to the board policy at this point, it would come back on February 12th, I believe, looking at our parliamentarian. Well, for approval.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move now to item T3, which is an application for a variable term program waiver for 2 teachers. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item?
Oh, there's nobody there.
I think he's over here this time.
Seeing no public comment, can we call the roll, please? Oh, Director Hinton-Hodge.
Just want to note that these are 2 waivers that we're providing for for teachers that are doing SPED work specifically, and so we're doing these waivers to make sure that there are kids in schools, and it's Reach Academy and Bret Hart, just to note.
Great, thank you. Can we call the roll, please?
On the roll call to adopt T.-3 or 20.0021, Director Torres.
Yes.
Director Harris. Yes. Director Ng. Director Ng?
Yes.
Okay. Director Hinton Hodge?
Yes.
Director Yee?
Yes.
And President London?
Yes.
The motion's adopted.
Thank you. We will now move to item V, which is adoption of the pupil discipline consent report. Is there a motion to approve? We had that earlier.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we call the roll, please?
On the motion to adopt item V, Director Hinton Hodge?
Yes.
Director Harris? Yes. Director Yee?
Yes.
Director Torres? Yes. Oh, yes. And Director Ng?
I'll abstain. I was not able to join closed session today.
Okay, all right. And President London?
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. At this time, we will move to board member reports. Are there any board member reports? Director Hinton Hodge.
Yes, sorry.
My mic on so you can hear this out in the public. Black College Expo coming to Oakland Saturday, February the 8th. The National College Resources Foundation is doing this, and this is in collaboration with the NAACP. It will be on Saturday. I know they start with a big caravan, and it's at the Marriott. And this will be an opportunity. I know my daughter actually, I remember her participating in this, and she got like on the spot acceptance into a college, and so this is an expo for 11th and 12th graders, and hope folks can go. Again, what did I say, Saturday, and it's all day long Saturday, 9 to 5. So hope folks will take the time out to take a kid with you there, or yourself there, and get be a part of this festival.
Thank you. Director Yee.
Three things. One, I represented the school board at the memorial service for Mel Cowell, who was a school board member in Oakland from 1962 to 1976, I believe. And at that meeting, one of the notable attendees, other than myself, was Dennis Chaconis. And so it was very powerful. And just to comment that that era was also coincidentally the era of Harry Reynolds' father, one of the facilitators at the 7-Eleven committee. Milton, right. Milton's father, Harry Reynolds, served as an associate superintendent in the Oakland Public Schools during the period of Marcus Foster. Also, I wanted to note that there will be a citywide plan blueprint meeting that is, I believe, several districts.
Do you mean the facilities master plan?
Facilities master plan engagement, I'm sorry, on February 3rd from 6 to 8 at Oakland Tech. And I think anybody in my district, certainly District 4, is cordially invited to attend. It's an extension of the initial meeting we had on the citywide plan. And finally, on, right, but the citywide plan and the master plan are similar types of conversations. And on February 22nd, the Castlemont High School Alumni Association is having their annual luncheon at the Metro Links at 11 o'clock. That's Saturday. And any Castlemont alums in the audience are cordially invited to attend. For more information, you can look up CHSAA, or you can give me an email and I'll tell you how to get there. It's a fundraiser for scholarships and a way to see generations of Castlemont grads coming together to celebrate the night pride. That's me too.
Director Torres.
Just really quickly, I got an email today from someone with Alameda County that on February 7th at the St. Jarlath Church, which is right on Fruitvale as you come off the 580 exit, they're having a census event, a kickoff, to get people aware of the important need to be counted in the census. So it starts at 8 o'clock with breakfast on February 7th. It's a Friday. And then at about 9, there's going to be a presentation. And then I believe at 10, there will be various organizations, tons of organizations, Unity Council, Spanish-Speaking Citizens Foundation, Centro Legal, a few others, that will be doing some workshops for people who want to volunteer to make sure and get out the information to the community in Oakland that the census needs to be filled out. So that's February 7th at St. Jarlath, and starts at 8 with breakfast. And I believe there's childcare. So,
thank you. Anything else? Director Hinton Hodge.
I just wanted to remind folks, I know one of my facilities master plan meeting is a week from yesterday, from Tuesday, and that's going to be at the West Oakland Middle School, and it's from 6 to 8 p.m.
Director Harris.
Yes, just a quick update. Our first Budget and Finance Committee meeting of the year will take place on Monday, February 3rd. That is the location, this is the location here at the hearing room down across from KDOL, where we will preview the first round of budget reductions for next budget cycle. The next meeting for the Budget and Finance Committee will be on the 18th of February. Both meetings start at 6 o'clock, and Edgar Rakestraw will be in attendance.
Director Ng, you are joining us by phone. Did you have a report?
Sorry, I was on mute. The only report that I have is that I did want to say that we are in the process of scheduling the Ed Partnership Committee meetings for this coming year. The first meeting is likely to be in late February or early March, but we're going to schedule out the entire year. We'll report back on dates for that. I'm also going to be holding facility master plan meetings in February. February 19th will be one at Dewey High School. We're still confirming the time, and we are also going to be hosting one at Roosevelt. And we are nailing down the date at this time, but that's primarily going to be for the District 2 school.
Thank you. I do have a report in my role as a director. This evening, over the weekend, I attended, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, the play that the Oakland Tech Drama Department put on about the class of 1981, which spent pretty much their entire high school career advocating in Sacramento for the Martin Luther King holiday to become a state holiday. And I went Saturday night, and the Apollo class of 81 was there. And former Assembly member and Mayor Elihu Harris was there. He was in the Assembly in the late 70s and early 80s. And it was just really an honor to see the play. It was written by the students, performed by the students. Everything about it was student-driven. It was really powerful. It's gotten a lot of coverage. It was an EdSource. I heard it on National Public Radio, the national broadcast on Monday. And I just really want to commend the class. We're hoping that they will come here on February 12th and have a special order where we can recognize them. And I don't know how, we're working with them. The kids were too busy focusing on the production to agree to a date. I also want to announce that in addition to the meeting on the Facilities Master Plan on February 3rd at Oakland Tech, I will be holding 2 meetings in my district. One is tomorrow night at 6:30 at Hillcrest, K-8, and the other one will be at Claremont Middle School on Thursday, February 6th. On Wednesday, February 5th, there will be a community meeting at Oakland Tech to talk about the Schools and Communities First initiative. For anyone in the public who's interested in learning more about that, we heard a little bit about that earlier this evening from our student directors, and I believe that was what I wanted to report on this evening. So that will conclude the director's reports. Are there any public comments on director reports? Welcome, Mr. Mordecai. It was a pleasure seeing you at the Oakland Tech play on Saturday night.
Likewise, it was an amazing production. Some of at least one of them, one of the members of that, I think, the brother I had in an elementary school class. So, and then of course, being active in the teachers union, I knew Tay MacArthur, the teacher. But the thing that it's always about story, and the story that Martin Luther King's holiday began at a social studies class at Oakland Tech. And the thing that you can always learn something new is I never realized that there was some type of change in grade level. And the play captured the fact that the teacher, Mr. MacArthur, felt that he was being abused by, he'd have to teach freshmen because he had enough time and he felt that he shouldn't have to do it. And that's one of those things that you look at something as being a negative and it turns out to be the highlight of your career. So it was a wonderful play, and I can't say enough about the I think all the schools have talent, but the talent that was displayed was amazing, and the technology and how they use lighting, it was just marvelous.
Thank you. We're going to go now to item N, introduction of new legislative matters. Director Harris, did you have something? Yeah. Someone just handed out this.
I did.
Oh, that was you, Director Torres. Okay.
Yeah. So I passed out the copies. It's double-sided, and it's the goal is to pass this resolution honoring still living Dolores Huerta. The governor passed a bill or signed the bill last year in July in regard to Assemblymember Eloise Reyes, whom I know, wanting to designate that April 10th be Dolores Huerta Day. And she's a civil rights leader, as many of you know, community organizer. We're sitting in a building that right next door down the hall is Dolores Huerta Hall. I was there when she came for it to be inaugurated, Dolores Huerta Hall. She was a little late, but she was awesome, and the students really enjoyed hearing from her that day. So I'm hoping we can get this on the agenda. Her story is pretty vast. I mean, she was born in New Mexico. She's in Stockton, obviously DC, Central Valley, and activist to this day. The last few times I've heard her speak, her main topic was how important school board races are. So for some reason, she's very much aware of either that it's a pipeline to higher office, but also just the fact that our students really need good governance boards to make the change we need in our education in California. So anyway, I hope that we can get this on the agenda. And if anybody wants to make any changes to the wording, this is a sample resolution that I was given. I didn't make many changes yet, so.
Thank you, Director Torres. We also received a request for this to come on the agenda from Director Harris, and we're looking to schedule it, I believe, for the second meeting in February so that we have time to advertise it before the actual day happens. Okay. And Director Hinton-Hodge.
It's not in writing at this particular point because it's more of a request for agendizing. The NAACP submitted a resolution, and it was approved at the state level that looks at the literacy rates and dyslexia rates of African American students, and that my request is for February the 26th, that it be agendized during some special order the day that the resolution be kind of read into action and read into the record. And I know the superintendent and her team are thinking about initiatives or strategies to kind of work on that. So I can work with you more around putting something more in writing, but I just wanted to kind of give a heads up that I'd like to see that special order of the day happen on February 26th.
Thank you. We are working on the calendar requests for these items. Any other new, oh, there's an item being introduced around the census. Oh, right, okay, we have Dolores here today. Okay, and we also have a resolution that we will vote on, bring forward at hopefully at our next meeting, supporting the 2020 census. It is extremely important that everyone participate in the census. It affects everything, just like it's really important that you vote. So I hope that we can do that. We'll talk more about that at our next meeting, which will be on February 12th, our next regular meeting. We do have a board retreat on Saturday, February 1st. Colleagues, I have been meaning to send you an email. We will be spending probably the bulk of the day talking about enrollment and enrollment policy and how we want to proceed in updating our enrollment policy. There are a host of issues that come into play. So the public is welcome to come. Even though we call it a retreat, we meet in this room and we're just here for much longer during the day than we are, about the same time as we are in the evening. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.